Hey everyone, I'm here with Yaron Brook, a noted objectivist philosopher. You may have seen the recording of a lecture of his I did and recorded on my alternate channel. And Yaron, thanks for joining me for an interview.
Thanks for doing the interview, and thanks for recording that lecture. Got a lot of views.
Yeah,
it was great.
My pleasure. It was very interesting. Anything titled "The Evils of Corbyn's Socialism," I'm interested. So, would you like to tell me kind of how you came into objectivism?
Sure. I was living in Israel. I grew up in Israel, and like all Israelis, I think in the 60s and 70s, I grew up with socialism. I mean, it was in our blood. It was every song, every class lesson plan. It was all about, in a sense, collectivism, the tribalism, the kind of Jewish tribalism, and socialism. And those were very much tied together. Right. So I was a committed collectivist and a committed socialist when I was growing up. And I had a discussion with a friend of mine one day, a friend who I'd known for many years, and he started spouting these capitalist ideas. And I basically said to him, "Where are you getting this nonsense from?" You know, and he handed me a worn-out old copy of Atlas Shrugged, and he said, "You got to read this book." So I did, and I read it. It turned out I read it very slowly because I wasn't buying it. Right, this was all wrong.
Right. Okay.
And I would throw it against the wall, and I would argue with Ayn Rand because it challenged everything I believed in. Everything was turned upside down. And by the time I finished the book, I was convinced, and I've never turned back. So when I finished that book, I was an individualist, I was a capitalist. You know, I obviously thought I knew more than I did. As most people who read Atlas Shrugged, and many of your viewers probably know this, you become very arrogant and obnoxious, as many young objectivists tend to be. But I continued studying ideas, reading pretty much everything she wrote, and then reading all the subsidiary literature on capitalism, on economics, history. You got to learn a lot of history. So I've been, I'd say, a committed objectivist since I finished Atlas Shrugged, but probably wasn't a knowledgeable objectivist until very many years later.
Right. Okay. And so, what was it about Atlas Shrugged that you found so challenging? I mean, can you go into detail about how it tore your world apart? Yeah, I mean, I think that the fundamental issue is an issue of morality, and I think that's true. To me, that's a centerpiece of objectivism, and really the core of what challenges you. I mean, what is at the core of collectivism? The core of collectivism is a moral idea that your moral purpose in life is to serve other people. Sacrifice is noble, is good, is wonderful for other people. Self-sacrifice. To be selfless is the ideal. And I believe that. I mean, I was just waiting for the grenade to fall down so I could jump on it to sacrifice my life for the sake of the cause, right? Or, of the tribe. And I really had bought into that. And here comes Ayn Rand and asks a very simple question, which I kind of asked myself at some point and rejected. So the question is why? Why is somebody else's happiness more important than yours? Why is somebody else's life more valuable than yours? Why should you sacrifice, in a sense, think less of yourself for the sake of others who are suddenly more important than you? Why should you jump in the grenade? Why is your life less important than the people you're saving? And I asked that question, and my answer was, well, it's the only option. I mean, otherwise I'd be selfish. Yeah. And selfishness means being a nasty person, and I don't want to be a nasty person, so obviously I have to sacrifice for others. And what Rand presents is this alternative of, no, you can be selfish, you can be self-interested, but in a proper sense, and for her proper would mean rational sense, in a sense of rationally thinking about what really is good for you, long-term, for the whole of your life, not doing whatever you feel like doing, because emotions are not tools of cognition, emotions are not really ways in which we know about the world to know what's good for us. Indeed, most of the time we get in trouble. Yeah, so really for the first time in my life, I was confronted with this idea that there was a rational way to live for yourself, which didn't mean being obnoxious, it didn't mean sacrificing other people to you, it didn't mean exploitation. It meant really focusing on what's good for me, how do I live the best life that I can live for the rest of my life. I was always an atheist, so it was always about, you've got one shot at this, you've got one life. So how do I rationally think about my life in a way that will maximize my flourishing, my happiness at the end of the day, in this life, in this world? And to me, that was a revolution, and hard, because
again, in Israel, when you grow up, you're trained. I mean, literally trained, I think, by the system to think in very other ways. And in Jewish culture, and really all the culture we have around us is a culture of be selfless. Now, nobody means it, right?
Yeah.
Your mother, when she says be selfless, doesn't actually mean it, because she wants you to succeed and she wants you to do what makes you happy and all this stuff. But morally, they are conditioned as parents to say, you've got to be selfless, you've got to think of others first, think of yourself last, all of this stuff. So to me, that was the most challenging, and I'd say then integrating that idea of self-interest into the idea of individualism. My life is mine. I don't owe it to the state. I don't owe it to the tribe. I don't owe it to a collective group of people. That probably took me the most time to integrate out of my system. So I would get teary-eyed when I'd see the Israeli flag go up. It probably took me years after I read Atlas Shrugged to stop that, right? To not get teary-eyed, because it represents something different for me now. And so now I get teary-eyed about when I hear people stories of individual success, of individual achievement. To me, that is the central focus, not group achievement, not the tribe. Not that I think groups are bad. It's living for the group, which I think is the problem.
That's very interesting that you make that distinction, actually, because that's a distinction that very few people make.